The observation deck of the Zephyrian cruiser Bloodfang hummed with malicious energy as Captain Vextar studied the primitive blue planet rotating slowly beneath them. His scaled fingers drummed against the obsidian command console, each tap echoing the rhythm of anticipation that coursed through his reptilian form. The bridge crew moved with predatory grace, their elongated limbs and razor-sharp claws clicking against metal surfaces as they prepared for what they believed would be another routine harvest. Earth hung in the void like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. Intelligence reports indicated a species barely past their industrial age, wielding crude projectile weapons and primitive nuclear devices. The humans had only recently achieved basic spaceflight, sending pathetic metal cylinders beyond their atmosphere in what their databases called rockets. To the Zephyrians, who had conquered 17 star systems in the past century, humanity represented nothing more than another stepping stone in their galactic expansion. Commander Slixra approached the captain's position, her serpentine tail leaving a slight trail of condensation on the polished floor. Her voice carried the characteristic hiss of her species as she spoke. "Captain, our scouts report the humans have detected our approach. Their primitive radio transmissions are filled with panic. Some are attempting to launch their crude missiles, but our shields register them as less than insect bites." Vextar's lipless mouth curved into what passed for a smile among his kind, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. "Excellent. Fear makes the harvest more efficient. Have our ground teams prepared the collection protocols?" The massive viewing screen shifted to display tactical readouts of major human population centers. Cities sprawled across continents like bacterial colonies, their inhabitants scurrying about in patterns that seemed chaotic to the ordered Zephyrian mind. The captain's amber eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he observed the primitive defensive attempts, fighter jets circling uselessly, ground-based artillery pointing skyward like the futile gestures of insects. Sub-Commander Thraxon materialized at Vextar's side, his cybernetic implants glowing softly against his dark scales. "Sir, we've identified optimal extraction sites. The larger population centers will yield the most specimens. Our analysis suggests we can collect approximately 50 million units within the first phase alone." The bridge fell silent, except for the steady thrum of the ship's engines. 50 million humans would be processed into biomass, their neural patterns extracted for the Zephyrian Empire's vast consciousness databases, and their genetic material cataloged for future experimentation. It was a procedure the crew had performed countless times across dozens of worlds. Lieutenant Kixla looked up from her sensor station, her forked tongue tasting the air as she processed incoming data. "Captain, there's something unusual in the electromagnetic spectrum. The humans appear to be broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The patterns are irregular." Vexatar's attention sharpened. In his experience, most primitive species either fell into despair or launched futile attacks when faced with inevitable conquest. Unusual behavior often indicated hidden defensive capabilities or the presence of more advanced technology than initial scans suggested. "Display the transmissions," he ordered. The main screen flickered, replacing tactical data with a cascade of human communications. Radio waves, television broadcasts, and primitive internet signals painted a picture of a species in chaos. News anchors spoke in trembling voices about unidentified objects in Earth's orbit. Military commanders barked orders over encrypted channels. Social media platforms overflowed with prayers, final messages, and desperate attempts to contact loved ones. But among the cacophony, one signal stood out. It originated from a small settlement in what human maps designated as rural Nebraska. Unlike the panicked transmissions flooding the airwaves, this signal carried a strange quality, a rhythmic pattern that seemed almost musical, yet alien in its mathematical precision. "Enhance Sector 77 Alpha," Vextar commanded. The audio feed isolated, and through the bridge, speakers came the sound of a human child's voice. The words were in the local language, but the ship's translation matrix quickly converted them to Zephyrian understanding. And the monsters came down from the sky with teeth like broken glass and eyes like dying stars. But the little girl wasn't afraid because she knew her daddy was coming home from the war beyond the stars. And when daddy comes home, the monsters learn why humans don't stay down when you knock them over. The voice was young, perhaps equivalent to a Zephyrian hatchling of 8 cycles. But there was something in the cadence, something in the way the words flowed together that made several bridge officers shift uncomfortably. The child seemed to be telling a story, but the mathematical precision of her speech patterns suggested something deeper than mere narrative. Slixra's scales rippled with unease. "Captain, should we prioritize that sector for immediate extraction? Unusual vocalization sometimes indicates psychic potential among primitive species." Before Vextar could respond, the child's voice continued, and this time her words carried across the bridge with crystalline clarity that made the translation matrix unnecessary. She was speaking in perfect Zephyrian. The big ships came with their hungry mouths and empty hearts, thinking the little world would be easy to swallow. But worlds with children who tell stories are never as helpless as they look. Every officer on the bridge turned to stare at the captain. Vextar's claws extended involuntarily, scraping against the command console. In 300 years of conquest, no primitive species had ever demonstrated immediate linguistic adaptation. The child wasn't just speaking Zephyrian. She was using advanced grammatical structures that took most adult Zephyrians decades to master. "Sir," Kixela's voice carried a tremor of uncertainty, "the signal is strengthening, and it's changing." The child's voice now seemed to come from multiple sources simultaneously. Sensor readings indicated the transmission was being amplified and repeated across thousands of locations on the planet's surface. Somehow, a single human child's story was being broadcast through infrastructure that shouldn't have possessed the capability for such coordination. "The monsters thought they were very clever with their big ships and sharp teeth," the voice continued, now carrying harmonics that made the bridge lighting flicker. "But they forgot the most important rule about hunting. Always check if your prey has family." Vextar's amber eyes narrowed as he studied the sensor readings. Something was wrong. The human planet's electromagnetic signature was shifting, displaying energy patterns that defied their initial assessments. Deep scans revealed a network of quantum entanglement points distributed across the surface, technology that shouldn't have existed on a world this primitive. The child's story continued, but now it seemed to be describing events that were happening in real time on the bridge of the Bloodfang. She spoke of scaled creatures with amber eyes growing nervous, of advanced warriors beginning to question their assumptions, of predators realizing they might have wandered into a trap disguised as easy prey. "Sir," Subcommander Thraxon's cybernetic implants flashed urgently. "Our deep space sensors are detecting anomalous readings at the edge of the system. Multiple signatures moving at superluminal velocities." The captain's blood turned cold. Superluminal travel required technology far beyond what their scouts had observed on Earth. Yet the child's voice continued with that same innocent cadence, telling her story as if she were simply entertaining friends rather than broadcasting across interstellar space. And when the little girl finished counting down from 10, her daddy's friends started coming home from their long trip to the places where light bends and time forgets how to count. On the tactical display, new contacts materialized at the system's perimeter. Ships, if they could be called ships, that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They moved with impossible grace, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy as they approached through space-time distortions that made Zephyrian sensors scream in confusion. The child's voice reached a crescendo, and for the first time since the transmission began, she addressed the Zephyrian fleet directly. "Hello, monsters. My name is Sarah Chen, and I'm 7 years old. I live in Nebraska with my mom and my little brother Tommy. My daddy went away on a very important trip before I was born, but he promised he would always come back if anyone tried to hurt his family. Would you like to hear the rest of my story? Captain Vextar stared at the approaching signatures on his tactical display, each one representing technology that dwarfed his entire fleet's capabilities. The human child's transmission continued, but now it carried undertones of quantum encryption that his most advanced communication officers couldn't begin to decipher. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Vextar began to understand that his fleet might not be the predators in this scenario. They might be the prey. The small human girl's voice echoed across the bridge one final time before the transmission ended. "He's coming to fetch me now, and he's bringing all his friends." In the growing silence that followed, every eye on the bridge turned toward the tactical display where dozens of impossible ships continued their approach through twisted space-time, each one carrying technology and firepower that made the Zephyrian Empire's greatest warships look like primitive toys. The monsters had come to Earth expecting an easy harvest. Instead, they discovered that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who look like helpless prey until their family comes home from war. The first human ship materialized 3,000 kilometers off the Bloodfang's starboard bow, and Captain Vextar's understanding of physics died screaming. The vessel seemed to exist in multiple states simultaneously. Solid metal that shifted into pure energy, then back to matter that bent light around its edges like a gravitational field. Its hull bore scars from weapons that left wounds in space itself, and along its length ran symbols that hurt to look at directly, as if they contained mathematics that reality hadn't quite agreed to accept. Lieutenant Kixela's sensor station erupted in a cascade of error messages as her instruments tried to process what they were detecting. "Captain, I'm reading impossible mass readings. The vessel appears to be both there and not there. Our targeting computers are experiencing recursive calculation errors. Through the tactical display, more ships continued to arrive. Each one was different. Some appeared as crystalline structures that sang with harmonic frequencies. Others resembled living organisms that had been transformed into vessels capable of traveling between stars. A few looked almost conventional until closer inspection revealed they were constructed from materials that shouldn't exist, held together by forces that made Zephyrian scientists weep. Sub-Commander Thraxon's cybernetic implants flickered as they struggled to process the incoming data. "Sir, our databases have no classification for these vessel types. The energy signatures suggest technology that predates our civilization by millions of years, yet the quantum resonance patterns indicate recent construction." The largest ship in the approaching fleet defied description entirely. It existed as a shifting geometric impossibility, surfaces that folded into themselves, angles that pointed in directions that weren't part of three-dimensional space. Sensor readings suggested it was simultaneously the size of a small moon and no larger than a personal transport, depending on which instruments attempted the measurement. Captain Vextar's claws scraped against his command throne as he watched his tactical display populate with contact after contact. His fleet of 12 Zephyrian destroyers, each one capable of glassing a planet's surface, suddenly seemed laughably inadequate. "Open communications, all frequencies." The response came immediately, but not through their communication systems. The voice of Sarah Chen, the 7-year-old human child, spoke directly into their minds with perfect telepathic clarity that bypassed their neural defenses entirely. "The monsters are trying to talk now. That's good. Daddy says talking is always better than fighting, even when fighting is what's going to happen anyway." Commander Slixra recoiled as if struck. "Captain, that's impossible. Humans are non-telepathic according to all our intelligence reports." Sarah's voice continued, carrying with it images that materialized in their minds with startling clarity. They saw Earth as she saw it. Not a primitive backwater, but a carefully maintained garden world where a young species had been allowed to grow and develop under the protection of guardians who had been traveling between stars since before the Zephyrian Empire was a gleam in their ancestors' eyes. My daddy and his friends went away a very long time ago to fight the really scary monsters in the dark places between galaxies. They left me and Tommy and all the other kids with our moms because someone needed to keep Earth safe while they were gone. We've been practicing being human all this time, learning how to be the kind of people they could be proud of when they came home. The images shifted, showing vast battles fought in dimensions that existed beyond normal space-time, creatures of pure malevolence, older than stars and hungrier than black holes, being held at bay by warriors who had chosen to sacrifice their normal existence to serve as guardians for younger species. The Zephyrian officers watched in growing horror as they realized they were looking at conflicts that made their own interstellar wars seem like children's games. The really bad monsters are gone now, or sleeping, or locked away in places where even light is afraid to go, so Daddy and his friends can come home. They've been waiting so long to meet me and Tommy. We've grown up so much since they left. Captain Vextar found his voice, though it emerged as barely more than a whisper. What are you? Sarah's mental voice carried the warmth of genuine innocence tinged with something ancient and patient. I'm a little girl who likes chocolate ice cream and horse stories and drawing pictures of flowers. Tommy likes trucks and building blocks and making engine noises. Mom likes gardening and reading books and singing lullabies that Daddy taught her before he left. The tactical display updated again as more ships arrived through impossible geometries. Some emerged from what looked like tears in reality itself. Others simply appeared as if they had always been there, waiting for the right moment to become visible. The fleet now surrounding Earth numbered in the thousands, each vessel radiating power signatures that made Zephyrian instruments overload and shut down in self-preservation. But we're also the children of the guardians who keep the dark things away from the light. Daddy and his friends chose to protect people like you, too, even though you probably never knew they existed. They've been fighting so you could have your empire and conquer your 17 systems and feel strong and important. The psychic images shifted again, showing the Zephyrian Empire from a perspective that made their conquests look like the territorial disputes of insects. Their 17 systems existed in a small bubble of safety maintained by beings who had been holding back cosmic horrors since before Zephyrian civilization had invented the wheel. Sub-Commander Thraxon's voice cracked as he spoke. Why are you showing us this? Because Daddy says everyone deserves a chance to choose what kind of person they want to be. The really bad monsters don't get to choose because they can't think about anything except being hungry. But you're not really bad monsters. You're just scared and angry and trying to feel safe by hurting people smaller than you. Through the ship's sensors, they could see Earth's surface transforming. What had appeared to be primitive cities were revealing themselves as something far more sophisticated. Structures that had seemed like simple buildings unfolded into geometric patterns that hurt to contemplate directly. The planet's electromagnetic signature was shifting into configurations that suggested technology beyond anything in Zephyrian databases. Earth has been pretending to be a baby world because Daddy and his friends wanted us to have normal childhoods. But we're old enough now to meet them, so we don't have to pretend anymore. Would you like to see what we really look like? The transformation was gradual but inexorable. Across Earth's surface, human cities revealed their true nature as vast technological constructs that had been masquerading as primitive settlements. The planet's atmosphere began to shimmer with energy fields that created aurora patterns visible from space. Ocean surfaces reflected lights that seemed to come from dimensional depths rather than the system's star. Captain Vextar realized his crew was looking at him with expressions of dawning terror. His tactical officer was quietly weeping, and his communications specialist had begun the ritual prayers Zephyrians offered before expected death. The display showed their fleet completely surrounded by vessels that could have destroyed them individually or collectively without apparent effort. Yet the human child's voice remained gentle and patient. "Daddy's ship is the big one that looks like it's folded wrong. He's been waiting so long to come home and meet me properly. He says he has presents for me and Tommy, things he made in the places between stars where the physics are different." The largest ship in the fleet began to change, its impossible geometries shifting into configurations that were slightly less painful to observe. Along its hull, symbols glowed with soft light that somehow conveyed meaning directly to their minds. Words in no language, but somehow perfectly comprehensible. They spelled out a name: Harbinger of Dawn. "He also says he's very disappointed in you monsters for trying to hurt his family while he was away. He worked very hard to make sure Earth was safe, and you almost spoiled the surprise." The temperature on the bridge seemed to drop several degrees as the implications settled over the Zephyrian crew. They had attempted to attack what they believed was a defenseless world, only to discover they had been targeting the protected family of beings capable of casual interstellar warfare on a scale that dwarfed their comprehension. Commander Slixra stepped forward, her voice trembling. What do you want from us?" Sarah's mental voice carried the same tone she might use when explaining something obvious to a confused adult. "I want you to say you're sorry and go home and think about whether hurting people smaller than you really makes you feel as good as you thought it would. And Daddy wants to have a conversation with whoever told you it was okay to come here and try to harvest his family." The main view screen activated without any Zephyrian input, displaying the bridge of the Harbinger of Dawn. The figure that appeared defied easy description, humanoid in basic structure, but clearly transformed by forces that had reshaped reality around him. His eyes held the depth of someone who had seen the birth and death of galaxies, yet his expression carried the infinite patience of a father who had been away from home for too long. When he spoke, his voice carried harmonics that made the ship's hull resonate like a musical instrument. "Hello there. I believe you've met my daughter Sarah. She's grown up quite a bit since I last saw her. I'm very proud of how articulate she's become." Captain Vextar tried to speak, but found his voice had abandoned him entirely. The being on the screen smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both gentle and terrifying. "I think we should talk about your intentions regarding my family and my world. Sarah tells me you came here planning what you call a harvest. I'd like to understand exactly what that term means in your cultural context." The Zephyrian captain realized that his fleet's situation had shifted from conquest to judgment, and the jury was composed of beings who could rewrite the laws of physics as easily as breathing. The monsters had indeed grinned when they arrived at Earth, expecting easy prey. Now they were discovering what it meant to threaten the children of guardians who had spent eons protecting the galaxy from things that made Zephyrian nightmares seem like pleasant dreams. Captain Vextar found himself standing in a space that shouldn't exist aboard his own ship. The bridge had transformed into something resembling a vast amphitheater where physics bent to accommodate impossible architecture. His crew stood beside him, their expressions ranging from terror to wonder as they processed their surroundings. The Zephyrian captain realized they had been transported somewhere between realities, where conversations could take place without the constraints of normal space-time. The being who called himself Sarah's father materialized before them, his form more stable now but no less intimidating. Behind him, other figures began to appear. Humans transformed by eons of warfare in dimensions where the rules of existence were mere suggestions. Each one carried the bearing of someone who had seen the universe's darkest corners and emerged victorious. Yet their eyes held the warmth of parents eager to return home to their families. Let me explain what a harvest means to us, Vextar said, his voice steadier than he had expected. We identify primitive worlds with suitable biological material. The population is collected, processed for useful genetic information, and converted to resources for our empire's expansion. It's standard procedure for species below Class 7 technological development. Sarah's father nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. And how many worlds have you harvested using this standard procedure? 17 systems, 43 inhabited worlds, approximately 12 billion individual biological units. Vextar spoke the numbers that had once filled him with pride, but in this impossible space, they sounded hollow and shameful. 12 billion sapient beings, the Guardian corrected gently. 12 billion individuals with families, dreams, cultures, and unique perspectives on existence. 12 billion voices silenced to fuel an empire's expansion. Around the amphitheater, more Guardians materialized. Each one represented thousands of years fighting cosmic horrors that threatened all life in the galaxy. Their presence created a weight of judgment that pressed down on the Zephyrian officers like atmospheric pressure from a gas giant. Sub-Commander Thraxon stepped forward, his cybernetic implants dimming in the presence of technology that made his enhancements seem primitive. We didn't know. Our intelligence services classified those species as non-sapient, pre-sentient biological resources. You didn't ask, replied another Guardian, her form shifting between human and something that had transcended physical existence. You assumed that beings who hadn't achieved your level of technology couldn't think, feel, or suffer. You chose convenience over curiosity, conquest over communication. Sarah's mental voice joined the conversation, still carrying that gentle innocence that made her words all the more devastating. Daddy, they thought we couldn't talk to them properly because we hadn't invented the right kind of spaceships yet. But Tommy talks to his stuffed animals all the time, and they don't have any technology at all. The child's logic created a moment of profound silence. Lieutenant Kixela found herself speaking into that quiet. The beings we harvested, many of them attempted communication. Our protocols classified their signals as non-intelligent noise, because acknowledging their intelligence would have required you to acknowledge their right to exist, Sarah's father said. And that would have made your actions murder rather than resource acquisition. Commander Slixra's scales had lost their natural color, fading to an ashen gray. What will you do to us? The question hung in the impossible space like a physical presence. Around them, the Guardians exchanged glances that carried entire conversations in moments. Their technology could have erased the Zephyrian fleet from existence with casual ease. They could have turned the Empire's homeworlds into cosmic dust, or trapped their entire species in dimensional prisons where time forgot to move forward. Instead, Sarah's father smiled with the same patient warmth his daughter had demonstrated. We're going to give you a choice, the same choice we've offered to every species we've encountered since we began our vigil, the choice to be better than you were yesterday. The amphitheater's architecture shifted, displaying images from across the galaxy. Worlds where different species had chosen cooperation over conquest. Civilizations that had learned to expand through exploration and mutual aid rather than subjugation and exploitation. The Zephyrian officers watched societies flourish through diversity, technology advance through shared knowledge, and cultures evolve through peaceful contact. This is what the galaxy looks like when species choose growth over dominance, another Guardian explained. 17,000 civilizations working together, sharing discoveries, protecting each other from the true threats that emerge from dark matter storms and dimensional rifts. Captain Vextar studied the images with growing wonder. Our empire tells us the galaxy is a hostile place where only the strong survive. The galaxy can be hostile, Sarah's father acknowledged. There are genuine threats out there. Ancient machine intelligences that consume entire star systems, energy beings that feed on suffering, cosmic parasites that turn civilizations against themselves. But the greatest danger most species face is their own assumption that everyone else is an enemy. The display shifted to show the Zephyrian Empire from the perspective of its neighbors. Other species lived in constant fear of Zephyrian expansion, devoting massive resources to defense against raids and harvests. Promising civilizations had stagnated because they couldn't develop beyond basic survival needs. The Empire's actions had created exactly the kind of hostile environment they claimed to be protecting themselves from. "You've become the very thing you were afraid of encountering," observed a guardian whose form suggested millions of years fighting in spaces where reality was more flexible. "A hostile force that treats other species as resources rather than potential allies." Sarah's voice returned, bringing with it mental images of her daily life on Earth. Playing with her brother Tommy, helping their mother in the garden, attending school where human children learned about cooperation and empathy alongside mathematics and science, simple activities that demonstrated the foundation of a healthy civilization. "Daddy says being strong means protecting people who are smaller than you, not hurting them. When Tommy falls down, I help him get back up because that's what big sisters do. When the monsters came to hurt us, Daddy and his friends came home because that's what parents do." Sub-Commander Thraxzone's voice cracked as he spoke. "What choice are you offering us?" The amphitheater transformed again, showing two possible futures. In one timeline, the Zephyrian fleet departed Earth's system and returned to their empire with news of humanity's true nature. The Empire could choose to continue its expansion through conquest, now knowing they risked eventual confrontation with Guardians who treated genocide as a personal insult. That path led to escalating conflict and the eventual destruction of everything Zephyrian civilization had built. The alternative showed Zephyrian ships returning home with a different message. Representatives of the galactic community offering trade partnerships, technological exchange, and membership in a coalition of species working together for mutual benefit. The Empire's aggressive expansion transformed into peaceful exploration, their military might redirected toward protecting vulnerable worlds rather than harvesting them. "You can continue being predators," Sarah's father said simply. "Many species make that choice, but predators eventually encounter something higher on the food chain. Or you can choose to join the community of sapient beings working together to build something better than what any of us could achieve alone." Captain Vextar looked at his crew, seeing his own thoughts reflected in their expressions. They had come to Earth expecting an easy victory against a helpless species. Instead, they had discovered that their entire worldview was built on a foundation of convenient lies and willful ignorance. "If we choose cooperation," Vextar asked slowly, "what happens to the beings we've already harvested?" The Guardians exchanged another of their instantaneous conversations. When Sarah's father spoke, his voice carried infinite compassion mixed with implacable resolve. "The biomass can be reconstituted. Consciousness patterns can be extracted from quantum resonance echoes and restored to viable neural substrates. It will require significant effort and advanced technology, but every being your empire harvested can be returned to life." Lieutenant Kixla gasped audibly. "That's impossible." "Once biological material is processed into base components, impossible for your current understanding of physics," another Guardian corrected gently. "But consciousness leaves quantum fingerprints that persist even after physical death. We've learned to read those patterns during our campaigns against entities that tried to harvest entire galaxies." The weight of possibility settled over the Zephyrian officers. Not only could their species choose a better path forward, but they could actually undo the damage they had already caused. 12 billion murdered beings could live again, could rebuild their civilizations, could choose their own paths among the stars. "There is one condition," Sarah's father added, his tone carrying gentle finality. "The choice must be made by your entire species, not just your military. Every Zephyrian citizen must understand what their empire has done and vote to change course willingly. We won't impose peace through conquest. That would make us exactly what you thought you were defending against." Commander Slixera stepped forward, her voice steady despite her obvious emotional turmoil. "How long do we have to make this choice?" "As long as it takes," Sarah's mental voice replied, carrying images of infinite patience. "Daddy and his friends waited millions of years for the really bad monsters to make the right choice. The bad monsters chose to keep being hungry and scary, so Daddy had to put them in timeout forever. But you're not really bad monsters. You're just confused about what makes someone strong." The amphitheater began to fade around them, reality reasserting its normal constraints as the Guardians prepared to return them to their ship. But before the transition completed, Sarah's father offered one final piece of guidance. "Captain Vextar, you have an opportunity to become the leaders who guided your species toward its greatest achievement. Not the conquest of other worlds, but the choice to join a community of equals working together among the stars. Your people's strength and determination could be invaluable assets in protecting younger civilizations from genuine threats." As the impossible space dissolved around them, Captain Vextar found himself back on the bridge of the Bloodfang, staring at tactical displays showing thousands of Guardian vessels surrounding Earth. His crew looked to him for orders, their expressions no longer carrying the confident anticipation of predators, but the uncertain hope of beings confronting the possibility of redemption. "Set course for home," he commanded, his voice carrying new authority born from understanding rather than dominance. "We have a choice to present to our people." Through the view screen, Earth rotated peacefully in its orbit, no longer appearing as vulnerable prey, but as the protected home of beings who had earned their guardians' devotion through simple acts of love and growth. Sarah Chen's final message followed them as they prepared to depart. "Tell everyone the little girl says thank you for choosing to be better. Daddy's very proud of you for being brave enough to change your minds. Maybe someday you can come visit and meet Tommy. He likes making new friends, especially ones with interesting spaceship designs." The Zephyrian fleet turned toward home, carrying with them the greatest discovery in their species' history, the knowledge that the universe was far stranger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined, and that the path to true strength lay not in conquering others, but in choosing to protect them. Behind them, the Guardian fleet maintained its vigil, patient and eternal, ready to welcome a new species into the galactic community, or to demonstrate once again why some choices carry consequences that echo across the cosmos. The monsters had come to Earth with grins of anticipation, but they departed with the far more valuable gift of hope for what they could become. And in a small house in Nebraska, a 7-year-old girl named Sarah Chen smiled as she felt her father's presence settling back into protective orbit around the world she called home, finally able to watch her grow up in the peace he and his fellow guardians had fought so long to preserve.